The crystal chandeliers of the Bách Niên Vọng banquet hall cast a light like stardust upon the elegant Shanghai chipaos and designer suits. The air was thick with the scent of white orchids and the self-satisfied perfume of success. Tonight was the 50th anniversary celebration, a milestone the founder, Old Master Wang, had likely never dared to dream of. I stood in a corner, a silent ghost in my faded white chef's coat, observing it all. 40 years of my life were buried in the kitchen behind me, a place where the smells of spices, steam, and sweat had seeped into my very being. I am Li Zhenfeng, the head chef, and tonight was supposed to have been my night. And now, Wang Hao's voice cut through the microphone, as sharp and cold as clinking glass. He stood on the stage, his hair slicked back with gel, his smile calculated to the millimeter. He was the future, and I, perhaps, was the past. To honor my grandfather's legacy, and to take Bách Niên Vọng to new heights, we are proud to announce a breakthrough that will change the culinary industry forever. A large screen behind him lit up, displaying a complex 3D molecule, spinning slowly. The words Dragon Soul 2.0, the essence of a legend, a taste for the world appeared. A murmur spread through the hall. I felt my chest tighten. Dragon Soul, the legendary soup, the very spirit of the restaurant, the thing Old Master Wang had entrusted to me as if it were a living soul. It wasn't a recipe on paper. It was the life of the blood dragon mushroom, the result of my 40 years of nurturing, a secret that I alone possessed. In partnership with a leading biotechnology firm, Wang Hao continued, his voice swelling with pride, we have successfully decoded and synthesized the essential flavor of the Dragon Soul soup. Now, this legendary taste is no longer limited by one kitchen, by one individual. It will be available everywhere in the world. He said one individual, and his gaze, sharp as a knife, landed directly on me. The entire room turned to look. I saw eyes filled with curiosity, pity, and even a hint of schadenfreude. A legacy is meant to be developed, not worshipped in a glass case, he went on, his voice rising slightly. Therefore, it is with regret that I must announce, due to disagreements in our vision for development and head chef Li Zhenfeng's refusal to cooperate on this revolutionary project, we must part ways with him. We thank him for his dedication, but Bách Niên Vọng must move forward. The air froze. Fired. He was firing me right here, in front of hundreds of people, on the 50th anniversary of the place I called home. It wasn't a business decision. It was a public execution. The humiliation didn't stop there, and so you can experience the future for yourselves. Wang Hao snapped his fingers. Waiters in brand new uniforms began carrying out small, steaming bowls of soup. Please, enjoy Dragon Soul 2.0. A waiter approached me, holding a silver tray with a single bowl on it. Its aroma hit my nostrils. It was vaguely similar, but it lacked depth, lacked the warm, earthy finish of time and care. It was a flat, soulless, chemical scent. Wang Hao stepped down from the stage and walked directly toward me, a retinue of reporters' lenses following him. He stopped, that same smile plastered on his face. Chef Li, you understand this soup better than anyone. Please, taste it, and give everyone your opinion on our achievement. Consider it a farewell. He was cornering me, forcing me to validate this forgery, to personally desecrate my own life's work. The room held its breath. I looked at the soup, then looked up into Wang Hao's eyes. For a fleeting moment, I saw the insecurity hiding behind his arrogance. He was afraid of me. He was afraid of the truth. Calmly, I picked up the porcelain spoon and dipped it into the broth. I didn't bring it to my lips. I raised it to my nose, inhaled deeply, and closed my eyes. My entire life in the kitchen flashed before me. I remembered my master, Old Master Wang, telling me, Zhenfeng, cooking is not mixing ingredients, it is a dialogue. You must be able to hear what the food is telling you. The liquid in this spoon was silent. I opened my eyes and set the spoon down without tasting a drop. Young master, I said, my voice quiet, but clear enough for those nearby to hear. This dish has no soul. Wang Hao's smile froze. It is merely a lifeless carcass, I continued. Congratulations on creating the perfect meal for those with no palate. With that, I untied my worn apron, folded it neatly, and placed it on the silver tray beside the bowl of soup. I said nothing more, looked at no one else. I turned, my back straight, and walked out of the magnificent hall. The whispers and the clicking of cameras followed me like a swarm of locusts. When the heavy wooden doors of Bách Niên Vọng closed behind me, they didn't just close on a banquet. They closed on 40 years of my life. The narrow alley leading to my home was dark and damp, a world away from the glamorous lights of Bách Niên Vọng. I walked aimlessly, my feet carrying me on autopilot to the old house where I had lived since I was a teenage apprentice. The Shanghai night air was chilly, seeping through my thin chef's coat, but I felt nothing. Inside, a profound numbness had set in. When I arrived home, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat down on a worn wooden chair in the darkness, placing a small sandalwood box on the table. It was the only thing I had gone back to the kitchen for before leaving for good. Not my knives, not my recipe books, but this box. I gently opened the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of red velvet, were 3 small pieces of substrate, covered in thread-like mycelium the color of dark, clotted blood. The blood dragon. They were the last of the original strain, the very lifeblood of the true dragon soul soup. I stared at them, and memories flooded back. I remembered the first day old Master Wang Hao's grandfather led me into the secret cellar beneath the restaurant. "Zhenfeng," he had said, his voice deep and solemn, "what I am about to show you is not an ingredient. It is our heritage. It is the life of my family, and of this restaurant." The cellar was small but controlled with painstaking precision for temperature and humidity. Inside were ceramic trays where the blood dragon mushrooms grew in silence. They were unlike any mushroom I had ever seen. Their stems were slender, their caps a brilliant blood-red hue, and as they matured, they emitted an aroma that was at once earthy like the soil after rain, woody like decaying logs, yet ethereal like traditional herbs. "This species cannot be grown from spores," my master explained. "It can only be propagated by taking tissue cultures from the mother plant. It is temperamental, sensitive to the slightest change in temperature, light, even the air. To cultivate it is not farming. It is an act of service." For 40 years I had served them. Every morning, my first task was to descend into the cellar, check each tray, adjust the humidity, and use a soft rabbit hair brush to gently sweep away any specks of dust. I learned to listen to them, to know when they needed water, when they needed darkness, when they were ready for harvest. I became part of their life cycle, and they became part of my soul. The secret of the cellar and its cultivation techniques were known only to my master and me. Before he passed away, he held my hand and said, "I am entrusting the soul of Bách Niên Vọng to you. Do not let it die." And tonight, I had let it die. Or at least, I had let its name be defiled. I had failed to protect his legacy. Wang Hao's so-called Dragon Soul 2.0, I knew exactly what it was. He had hired expensive labs to analyze the chemical compounds in the soup, and then used artificial flavorings to mimic them. He had captured the vocabulary of the flavor, but he was utterly powerless before its life, before the chi of the blood dragon mushroom, something that could only be created by earth, water, air, and time. He had turned a symphony into a cheap ringtone. Anger finally began to smolder within me, a slow burn that cut through the initial numbness. It was anger not just at the humiliation, but at Wang Hao's ignorance and arrogance. He hadn't just fired an old chef. He had spat on the work of 3 generations, on the art of cuisine, on the very soul of his own family. He had sold his heritage for the promise of profit margins on a spreadsheet. I looked back at the 3 pieces of mycelium in the box. They were all that was left. Everything at Bách Niên Vọng, the entire ecosystem I had so painstakingly built, would likely wither and die under the care of people who only knew how to read financial reports. But as long as these 3 pieces were alive, the soul of the Dragon Soul soup was not truly dead. It was merely waiting. I stood up and went into my kitchen. My small, cluttered but warm kitchen. I took out a small ceramic jar, carefully prepared a mixture of sawdust and rice flour in a secret ratio, and meticulously sterilized it. Every movement was slow, precise, a habit ingrained in my very being. As I worked, I didn't think of Wang Hao, nor of Bách Niên Vọng. I thought only of keeping the fragile life in my hands alive. I did not sleep that night. I sat beside the ceramic jar into which I had transplanted the last threads of the mushroom, monitoring the temperature. Outside, the city of Shanghai slept. But inside my small house, a quiet battle to preserve a legacy had just begun. I had lost my kitchen, but I still had my craft. And that was something no one, no matter how much money or how many MBA degrees they had, could ever take from me. The following days passed in a strange silence. I confined myself to my home, not reading the news, not going online. I dedicated all my time to caring for the new batch of blood dragon mushrooms. They were like fragile newborns, demanding my absolute attention. I spoke to them, sometimes murmuring old recipes, sometimes just quiet words of encouragement. Perhaps I was old and senile, but I believed that life could feel care. The silence was broken on the fifth day by the shrill ring of the telephone. It was Zhao Zhang, a young cook from my kitchen, a talented and hardworking boy I had always tried to mentor. "Master," his voice on the other end was panicked. "Something terrible has happened." I remained silent, waiting. That Dragon Soul 2.0 essence. "There's a problem with it," Xiao Zhang said in a near whisper, as if afraid of being overheard. "It was fine for the first few days, but now, the taste is strange. It has a very unpleasant, bitter aftertaste. And worse, Master, some customers are having allergic reactions." "Allergic reactions?" I repeated, my heart skipping a beat. "Yes, nothing severe, just rashes and itching. But the news has spread. People are talking all over social media. They're saying Bách Niên Vọng is using chemicals, that the legendary soup is now a fraud. Business has dropped sharply. Yesterday, there were only a handful of tables." Isai hid. It was bound to happen. Wang Hao and his scientists could analyze hundreds of compounds, but they couldn't predict their complex interactions when concentrated and preserved with chemicals. The fresh blood dragon mushroom contained active enzymes that balanced and harmonized its flavors. When turned into a dead essence, it lost that ability, and secondary compounds could cause unforeseen reactions. "And what about young Master Wang Hao?" I asked. "He's going crazy," Xiao Zhang replied. "He's blaming the biotech company, saying they supplied an unstable product. He's called in experts to change the cooking process, but everything is just getting worse. The kitchen is in chaos, Master. Without you, everyone is like a headless snake. No one knows what to do." I could picture it. A kitchen operates not just on recipes, but on rhythm, on understanding and experience. I had been the conductor of that orchestra for 40 years. Now that the conductor was gone, the orchestra was just a cacophony of noise. "Master," Xiao Zhang's voice suddenly became pleading, "everyone in the kitchen misses you so much. Everyone is saying only you can save Bách Niên Vọng. Maybe you could come back." "I'm sure if you spoke with young Master Wang Hao." "Xiao Zhang," I interrupted him, my voice calm. "I am no longer part of Bách Niên Vọng. What happens there is no longer my concern. But it's your life's work. My life's work is cooking, is protecting this craft. As for Bách Niên Vọng," I paused, "it is now just a commercial brand. It is no longer a place where I belong." I hung up, my heart heavy. I felt no satisfaction in Wang Hao's failure, only a profound sorrow. Sorrow for a century-old brand being destroyed by arrogance. Sorrow for my former colleagues, struggling in that mess. Out of curiosity, I turned on my computer for the first time. The headlines on the culinary news sites and social media feeds struck me. "The fall of a legend. Bách Niên Vọng in crisis. Customers allege allergic reactions to Dragon Soul soup. Wang Hao's revolution. A failed gamble." There were thousands of comments filled with criticism, disappointment, and scorn. Pictures of half-eaten bowls of soup, one-star reviews. A reputation built over 50 years was turning to dust in a single week. I read an analysis by a famous food critic. He wrote, "The problem with Dragon Soul 2.0 is not just its flavor. The problem is that Wang Hao tried to industrialize something that is inherently an art. He tried to replicate a master's painting with a photocopy machine. The result might look similar in form, but it can never possess the soul, the spirit of the original. Bách Niên Vọng has single-handedly killed its own soul." The writer was absolutely right. I turned off the computer, a wave of fatigue washing over me. I wasn't happy. I just felt a terrifying emptiness. Wang Hao had destroyed my home. And now he was sitting in its ashes, likely still not understanding why the fire had started. I returned to my jar of mushrooms. The delicate red threads of mycelium had begun to spread, clinging tightly to the substrate. They were alive. Amidst all the ruin and chaos outside, here, in my small kitchen, life was quietly carrying on, and that gave me a flicker of hope. Perhaps, from these ashes, something new could be reborn. The following weeks I lived like a hermit. The news about Bách Niên Vọng grew worse. They had to temporarily suspend serving the Dragon Soul soup, issue a public apology, and promise compensation to the affected customers. It was a fatal blow. A restaurant that lived by its signature dish was now forced to remove it from the menu. It was like a singer losing their voice. I no longer received calls from Xiao Zhang. I guessed Wang Hao had tightened discipline, or perhaps he too had left like so many others. I made no attempt to contact him. I had completely cut myself off from that world. My energy was now focused solely on propagating the blood dragon mushrooms. From the 3 original samples, I now had nearly 20 jars of healthy, growing mycelium. My small kitchen looked more like a laboratory, with ceramic jars lined up neatly and a chart on the wall tracking temperature and humidity. I began to feel adrift. My purpose for 40 years had been to cook for others. Now, I held the most precious ingredient in my hands, but I had no one to serve. I was a guardian of a treasure in an empty room. A feeling of uselessness gnawed at me daily. One rainy afternoon, as I sat watching the raindrops trace paths down the windowpane, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I hesitated before opening the door. Standing before me was a young woman, perhaps 30 years old, dressed in an elegant business suit and holding an expensive umbrella. Her face was familiar, but I couldn't place it immediately. "Head Chef Li," she said, her voice warm and full of respect. "My name is Chen Ani. I don't know if you remember me." Chen Ani? The name. I searched my memory. Then, a faint image surfaced. A skinny little girl, about 10 years old, in shabby clothes, huddling by the back door of Bách Niên Vọng on a freezing winter night. Her eyes were fixed on the trash cans full of leftovers, a mixture of hunger and fear in them. That day, my heart had ached. I went inside and ladled her a hot bowl of dragon soul soup, the simpler version we made for the staff, which still held the rich flavor. The little girl had devoured it, tears streaming down her face. "The little girl from all those years ago?" I blurted out. Ani smiled, a radiant smile. "Yes, that's me. Your bowl of soup that night saved me from starving. It didn't just warm my stomach, it showed me that kindness still existed in the world. I promised myself that one day, I would repay you." I awkwardly invited her in. My cluttered home seemed to shrink in her sophisticated presence. Ani didn't seem to mind. She sat down, her eyes scanning the jars of mushrooms on my shelves. "I heard what happened at Bách Niên Vọng," she said, her tone becoming serious. "And I heard that you had left. I've been looking for you for weeks." "Why look for me?" I asked. "I'm just an unemployed old cook." "You are not an unemployed cook," Ani said firmly. "You are an artisan, and an artisan should not let his talent go to waste." She placed a folder on the table. "Chef Li, I'm here not just to thank you. I'm here to make you a proposition." I looked at her skeptically. "I now run a small investment fund," she explained. "We specialize in projects that are sustainable and have a strong heritage component. I want to partner with you. I want to open a new restaurant." "A restaurant for you?" I was stunned. "Open a new restaurant? At my age?" "It won't be a second Bách Niên Vọng," Ani said quickly, as if reading my thoughts. "Not a massive, money-making machine. I envision something small, intimate, perhaps only a few tables. A place where you have complete creative freedom, where you can cook the food you are truly passionate about, free from the pressures of sales targets and investors. A place for you to preserve and develop your legacy in its truest sense. I will handle all the finances and management. You only need to do one thing: cook." Her offer was like a seed suddenly sprouting in the middle of a frozen winter. It was as tempting as it was terrifying. I was so tired of the fighting, of the ruthless business world. I just wanted peace. "Why me?" I asked. "You could hire many younger, more talented chefs." Ani looked me straight in the eye, her gaze sincere. "Because what I want to build is not just a restaurant but a story. A story of perseverance, of true value, of a bowl of soup that changed a little girl's life. I'm not investing in a recipe, I'm investing in the soul of the food. And that soul, only you possess." Her words touched the deepest part of me, the soul of the food. It was everything I had pursued my entire life. Wang Hao had tried to steal it, and failed. Now, this young woman wanted to help me build a temple to enshrine it. I looked out the window. The rain had stopped. A weak ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the jars on the shelf. I could see the red threads of mycelium growing strong. They were ready for a new home, and perhaps so was I. "I will need a cellar," I said, my voice hoarse. "A cellar with precise control over temperature and humidity." Chen Ani's smile lit up the entire room. "I will build you an underground palace if you wish." Ani worked with astonishing speed and decisiveness. Within a month, she had found the perfect location. It wasn't a flashy storefront in the city center, but an old villa tucked away in a quiet lane of the former French concession. The villa had a small, lush garden, creating a sense of seclusion and peace. "I want guests to come here not just to eat, but to have an experience, to find a moment of tranquility in the bustle of Shanghai," Ani said. We decided to name the restaurant the Serene Garden. True to her word, Ani had a cellar constructed beneath the garden. It was equipped with the latest technology for environmental control, even better than the old cellar at Bách Niên Vọng. I personally moved every jar of blood dragon mushrooms to their new home. Seeing them thrive in the ideal environment brought me a pure joy I hadn't felt in a long time. The restaurant's design was the complete opposite of Bách Niên Vong's ostentation. The serene garden had only 5 tables, each set in a private space overlooking the garden. The furniture was made of natural wood, the ceramics rustic and simple. There were no crystal chandeliers, only the warm glow of paper lanterns. Everything exuded a simple, refined beauty. The kitchen was my kingdom. Ani had spared no expense on the best equipment, but she gave me full authority over its layout. I designed a space that was open, clean, and where everything was within easy reach. I hired only 2 assistants, one of whom was Xiao Zhang. He had quit Bách Niên Vọng right after our phone call and was overjoyed when I called him. "Wherever master goes, I will follow," he said, without a hint of hesitation. We didn't have a fixed menu. Each day, I would decide what to cook based on the freshest ingredients I could find at the market that morning, and of course, on the condition of the blood dragon mushrooms. The dragon soul soup would be the centerpiece, but I also began to create new dishes. Dishes I never had the chance to experiment with at Bách Niên Vọng due to the pressure of upholding tradition. I experimented with combining the unique fermentation techniques of the blood dragon with other ingredients, creating complex and surprising flavors. Ani never interfered with my craft, but she built a very clever business model. The serene garden did not accept walk-in guests. Customers had to book months in advance, and each meal was a complete tasting menu decided by me. The price was not cheap, but this created an air of exclusivity and desire. Ani said, "We are not selling food. We are selling an experience that cannot be found anywhere else." In the process of preparing for opening day, I felt reborn. The pressure was gone, replaced by the joy of creation. I was no longer an employee, a machine repeatedly cooking a legacy soup. I was an artist, free in my own studio. I realized that being fired from Bách Niên Vọng, however bitter, had been a liberation. It had pushed me out of my comfort zone and forced me to rediscover myself. Wang Hao and Bách Niên Vọng had become a distant memory. Occasionally, I would hear snippets of news that they were still struggling, that they had tried to hire another celebrity chef to revive the restaurant, but to no avail. The dragon soul soup without the blood dragon mushroom would forever be just an empty name. They had lost their soul, and no marketing gimmick could hide that fact. On the opening night of the serene garden, we held no grand celebration. There were only 5 tables of guests, all of them business associates of Ani, and a few trusted food critics. That night, I cooked every dish with my own hands. When the first bowl of dragon soul soup was served, I stood in the kitchen, listening. A silence fell over the dining room. Then came quiet gasps of appreciation. One guest was heard to exclaim, "This is the true dragon soul." Later that night, after the last guest had left, Ani walked into the kitchen. She said nothing, but simply bowed to me. In her eyes, I saw admiration and gratitude. "Thank you, Chef Li," she said. "You've brought the soul back." I looked around my new kitchen, at the young assistants, tired but content, cleaning up. I felt a sense of absolute peace. This wasn't revenge. This was a resurrection. I had found my own serene garden, a place where I could replant the legacy I had almost lost. And this time, I would make sure its roots grew so deep that no storm could ever topple it. Good news travels fast. The serene garden needed no advertising campaign. Within a week, our restaurant became the talk of Shanghai's discerning food circles. Reviews began to appear, not on gossip sites, but on respected culinary blogs and in specialized magazines. They didn't just praise the food, they wrote about the entire experience, the tranquility of the garden, the elegance of the space, and above all, the story behind the return of a legend. They called me the keeper of the soul. They described my dragon soul soup not just as a dish, but as the taste of memory, something that could transport a person back to the most fundamental and authentic values. One critic wrote, "Tasting Chef Li's soup, I finally understood the difference between a product and a creation. What Bách Niên Vọng is trying to sell is a product. What the Serene Garden offers is a priceless work of art." The waiting list for a reservation stretched to 6 months. We received partnership proposals, franchise offers, and interview requests from international television channels. Ani refused them all. "Our goal is quality, not quantity," she said firmly. "The Serene Garden's specialness lies in the fact that it is unique." I completely agreed. We had not built this place to repeat Wang Hao's mistakes. Every day at the serene garden was a joy. I had time to talk to the farmers who supplied our organic vegetables, the fishermen who brought us the freshest catch. I had time to teach Xiao Jiang and the other young cooks not just techniques, but the philosophy behind each dish. I taught them to respect the ingredients, to listen, and to feel. My kitchen became a small school, a place where legacy could be passed down naturally and with inspiration. One evening, as I was preparing ingredients, Ani walked in, a pensive look on her face. "A guest just called, wanting to book a table for tonight. A very special guest," she said. "You know our rules," I replied, my hands never ceasing their work of slicing ginger. "The list is full." "This person said he would pay any price," Annie continued. "And he wants to meet with you privately. His name Island, Wang Hao." The knife in my hand paused. Wang Hao. That name, I had tried not to think about it. What did he want from me? His arrogance wouldn't allow him to admit his mistakes. Perhaps he had come to mock me, to see how pathetic my new place was. "Tell him there are no tables," I said curtly. Ani hesitated. "Chef Li, I think you should see him. Not for his sake, but for yours. Sometimes, we need to confront the past to truly move on." I considered her words. Perhaps she was right. Avoidance was not the answer. "All right," I said after a moment of silence. "Give him a table, the one in the corner of the garden. And after service I will go see him." That evening Wang Hao arrived alone. He no longer had his polished, confident air. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair was not meticulously gelled, and dark circles were visible under his eyes. He sat silently in the garden corner, saying nothing, just staring into space. I had prepared the same menu for him as for the other guests. And of course, it included the dragon soul soup. When the waiter brought the bowl out, I watched him from a small window in the kitchen. He looked at the soup, then picked up his spoon, his hand trembling slightly. He took a spoonful and brought it to his mouth. In that instant, I saw his shoulders slump. He said nothing, just buried his face in his hands. He stayed like that for a long time. I couldn't tell if he was crying or just broken, but it was the image of a completely defeated man. After the other guests had left, I walked out into the garden. Wang Hao was still there. He looked up when he saw me, his eyes red. "Why?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Why did I have all the data, all the analysis, and still couldn't do it? What is in your soup that I couldn't copy?" I sat down opposite him, looking into the desperate eyes of a lost child. "You couldn't copy time," I said slowly. "You couldn't copy patience. You couldn't copy devotion. You thought this soup was a collection of chemical compounds, but you were wrong. It is a collection of 40 years of early mornings, of sleepless nights, of failures, of love for a fragile mushroom. You cannot bottle those things, Wang Hao." He was silent, looking down at the table. I'm sorry," he whispered. "Bách Niên Vọng. It's going bankrupt. The investors are pulling out. I've lost everything." "You didn't lose everything," I said. "You threw everything away with your own hands. You threw away your grandfather's legacy, the loyalty of your staff, the trust of your customers, all for greed and arrogance." The meeting ended in silence. I felt no satisfaction seeing him so miserable, only a deep sadness. He had held a fortune in his hands, not just material but cultural, and yet he chose to destroy it. That night, as I walked home, I realized that the taste of memory sometimes carries the bitter flavor of regret. The meeting with Wang Hao that night was merely the prelude to a much larger storm. A few days later, news of Bách Niên Vọng filing for bankruptcy protection spread across every newspaper. The parent corporation's stock plummeted. The image of the shuttered Bách Niên Vọng building, a court seizure notice taped to its doors, became a symbol of a fallen empire. For me, it was a complex feeling. A part of me grieved to see the place I had devoted my life to end so tragically. But another part saw it as an inevitable outcome, a painful but necessary lesson for those who disregard true value. The kitchen at the serene garden operated as usual. The chaos outside only made the peace within our garden more precious. However, I knew the storm would not stop at our gate. Sure enough, one afternoon, as I was teaching Xiao Jiang how to recognize a perfectly ripened blood dragon mushroom, Ani entered with a grave expression. "We have visitors, Chef Li," she said quietly. "Not guests with reservations. They are the investors from Bách Niên Vọng, and Wang Hao is with them." I set down the tray of mushrooms. "What do they want?" "They want to talk to you," Ani replied. "They say you are the only hope to salvage what's left. Wang Hao has told them everything. About the soup, the blood dragon mushroom, about your role. It seems that in his desperation, he has finally told the truth. I sighed. I have already said everything I needed to say to him. This is different, Annie said. They are not here to beg you to return to Bách Niên Vọng. They've come with a different proposal. I think you should hear them out. I reluctantly agreed. The meeting took place in the restaurant's private tea room. Seated opposite me were 3 middle-aged men in gray suits, their faces etched with fatigue and stress. Wang Hao sat in a corner, shrunken like a shadow, not daring to look at me. One of the men, apparently the representative, spoke first. He introduced himself as Mr. Zhang, representing the major shareholders. Chef Li, he began, his tone respectful, a stark contrast to Wang Hao's former condescension. We have come here today, first and foremost, to offer you our sincerest apologies. We were wrong to believe in Wang Hao's plan and failed to recognize your true value to the company. The fall of Bách Niên Vọng is the clearest proof of that mistake. I nodded, saying nothing. We know you will not come back to work for us, Mr. Zhang continued. But we have a proposition. We want to buy your recipe and the cultivation technique for the blood dragon mushroom. We will pay you an extremely handsome price, enough for you to live in luxury for the rest of your life. We will sign a contract where you will serve as a senior consultant, just to guide our new team for a few months. After that, you can retire completely. The offer was even more shameless than begging me to return. They still didn't understand. They still thought everything could be bought with money. They wanted to purchase my soul and then pay me a price for it. Mr. Zhang, I said, my voice calm but firm. What you want to buy is not a recipe. It is 40 years of my life. It is my promise to my master. It is not a commodity for sale. But it's just a mushroom, another investor interjected, losing patience. We can set up a modern laboratory, hire the best experts. You have already done that, I cut him off. And you have all seen the result. You can buy equipment, you can hire experts, but you cannot buy patience and devotion. The blood dragon mushroom needs those things to live. Without them, it is just an ordinary fungus. The atmosphere in the room grew tense. Wang Hao sat frozen, not daring to utter a sound. Mr. Zhang rubbed his temples. So, there's no way? Are you really going to watch Old Master Wang's legacy vanish into thin air? That remark struck a nerve. He was using my own master to pressure me. Old Master Wang's legacy lies in quality and integrity, not in the name Bách Niên Vọng, I retorted. You and Wang Hao here destroyed it when you tried to turn it into a mass production machine. Now you want me to help you patch up your mistake? I am sorry, but I cannot. I stood up. This conversation is over. The serene garden is about to open for service. Please, see yourselves out. They looked at me, their eyes filled with anger, helplessness, and perhaps a touch of disbelief. They could not comprehend why an old chef would refuse a mountain of gold. As they left, Wang Hao was the last to walk out the door. He turned back to look at me, his expression complex. Master Li, he said, calling me master for the first time. I was truly wrong. I just looked at him, not replying. He bowed his head and shuffled away. The storm had truly passed, leaving a field of ruin in its wake. And I knew the story was not over yet. There were other truths buried in that wreckage, waiting to be brought to light. I thought that after refusing the investors, everything would be over. I could return to my peaceful life at the serene garden. But I was wrong. A few days later, an unexpected event turned everything upside down, exposing a truth far worse than Wang Hao's ignorance and arrogance. Xiao Zhang rushed into the kitchen, holding a tablet, his face pale. Master, look at this. He showed me an investigative report that had just been published in a major financial newspaper. The sensational headline hit me. The Bách Niên Vọng scandal, not just a business failure, but an organized fraud. The article, based on inside sources and leaked documents, exposed Wang Hao's entire scheme. The so-called leading biotechnology corporation he had partnered with was, in fact, a shell company registered in some tax haven with no research activities whatsoever. It was created for the sole purpose of fabricating a compelling story to attract new investors. Wang Hao's plan was more sinister than I had imagined. He knew perfectly well the soup could not be replicated. Firing me and launching Dragon Soul 2.0 was all just an act. He wanted to create a media frenzy, to paint a vision of a globally scalable culinary empire. His goal was to skyrocket the stock price in a short period, then sell off his entire stake and abscond with the money before the bubble burst. The customer's allergic reactions were an unforeseen accident that caused the bubble to pop sooner than he had planned. The article also published internal emails in which Wang Hao mocked the investors as greedy fools and called his grandfather's legacy an outdated burden that needs to be liquidated. Reading that, I felt a wave of nausea rise in my throat. This was no longer a clash between tradition and modernity. This was an act of forgetting one's roots, a betrayal of the highest order. He didn't just want to make money. He wanted to destroy everything, including his own family's honor, to satisfy his bottomless greed. The police were now involved. Wang Hao was arrested shortly after, facing charges of fraud, stock market manipulation, and endangering consumer health. The image of him in handcuffs, disheveled and haggard, being led away from his luxury villa, was on every news channel. The empire he tried to build on lies had collapsed and buried him. That evening, the serene garden opened as usual. But the atmosphere in the kitchen was somber. Everyone had read the news. Xiao Zhang shook his head as he worked, muttering, "Unbelievable. How could he do that to his own grandfather?" I was silent. The anger inside me had subsided, leaving only a cold emptiness. I thought of old Master Wang. If he were alive, how much pain would he feel, seeing the grandson in whom he had placed such high hopes become such a person? The old master once told me, "Zhenfeng, cooking techniques can be learned, but the heart of a chef must be cultivated." Wang Hao not only lacked technique, but he had no heart. As I was preparing the final course, Ani came in. She brought me a cup of hot tea. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. I nodded. "I'm just thinking about how much a person can change." "Greed can turn men into monsters," Ani said. "But it's at times like these that we see the value of kindness and integrity. What you're doing here, it's not just cooking. It's a statement. A statement that there are still people who believe in doing things the right way." We stood in silence together, looking out at the garden at night. The warm yellow light cast a peaceful glow on the leaves. The world outside might be in turmoil, but here, in the serene garden, we had a sanctuary, a place where true values were cherished. I realized then that my fight was not with Wang Hao. He was merely a symptom of a larger disease, the disease of haste, of pursuing profit at all costs, of losing one's roots. My real fight was against that disease, and the serene garden was my weapon. That night, I decided to add a new dish to the next day's menu, a simple dessert, made from the humblest of ingredients, sweet potato, ginger, and molasses. I would name it Varngban, remembering the roots. It was my answer to everything that had happened. Amidst the complexity and deceit, sometimes what we need most is to return to what is simple and true. After Wang Hao's scandal, the name Bách Niên Vọng was effectively dead. The building was seized, its assets frozen pending liquidation. It stood as a silent monument to greed and collapse. I tried not to think about it, focusing on my work at the Serene Garden, which was steadily becoming a legendary destination in the culinary world. But fate, it seems, has its own ironic designs. One morning, Ani asked to see me in her office. Her expression was a mixture of excitement and hesitation. "Chef Li, I have an idea," she began. "You might think I'm crazy, but please, hear me out." I looked at her, waiting. "The Bách Niên Vọng building is about to be auctioned off to pay its creditors," she said. "The starting price is very low, almost just the value of the land. No one wants to touch a brand with such a ruined reputation." She paused, taking a deep breath. "I want to buy it." I was stunned. "Buy it? For what? To open a branch of the Serene Garden? I thought we agreed not to expand." "No," Ani shook her head. "Not to open a branch. I want to return it to its rightful owner." Her eyes locked onto mine. "I want you to go back there, Chef Li. Not as an employee, but as the master of the house. I want you to rebuild Bách Niên Vọng from the ashes, in your own way." The idea was overwhelming. To return to the place that had humiliated and cast me out? To return to the kitchen that was once my home, but also the scene of betrayal? "Why?" I asked, my voice strained. "The Serene Garden is doing so well. We have everything here. Why go back to a place filled with such painful memories?" "Because it's not just a building," Ani said, her voice full of passion. "It's a legacy. Wang Hao tried to destroy it, but he failed. Its soul is still alive, and it's in your hands. The Serene Garden was where you healed and rediscovered yourself. But Bách Niên Vọng is where your legacy belongs. You can't let it die in disgrace like this. This is your chance to rewrite the ending to its story, and to yours." Her words were like a key, unlocking a door in my heart I had tried to keep shut. I had always thought I had completely moved on, But deep down, the image of a derelict Bách Niên Vọng still pained me. It was my master's life's work, the vessel that held 40 years of my youth. Even if we buy it, what would we do? I asked, starting to be drawn into her vision. The name Bách Niên Vọng is tainted. Then we will cleanse it, Ani replied decisively. We won't open immediately. We will take our time to renovate, to rebuild from the ground up. We will announce a new story. The story of the true head chef's return, of the revival of a heritage. People will be curious. They will give us a chance. And when they taste your soup again, in the very place it was born, they will believe. Trust will be rebuilt from the taste of authenticity. We talked for a long time. Ani had laid out a detailed plan, not just financially, but with a clear vision. She didn't want the gaudy Bách Niên Vọng of old. She wanted a place that was both elegant and culturally deep. A restaurant combined with a small museum of culinary history, a small cooking school led by me. The idea of a school truly convinced me. I was getting old. I couldn't stand in the kitchen forever. The most important thing now was to pass on what I knew to the next generation, so that the legacy of the blood dragon mushroom and the philosophy of true cooking would not be lost again. If we do this, I said finally, I have one condition. We will not keep the name Bách Niên Vọng. It carries too much pain. I want a new name. What would you like to call it? Annie asked. I thought for a moment, then looked out the window at the sun shining on the garden. Then Vọng, I said. New Hope. Annie smiled. New Hope. I like that. A few weeks later, at a quiet auction with few interested parties, Annie's company successfully acquired all the assets of Bách Niên Vọng. The day I received the keys to re-enter that building, my emotions were in turmoil. I walked through the banquet hall where I had been fired. I entered the cold, dusty kitchen where I had spent my life. I descended into the secret cellar, now empty and musty. The circle seemed to have closed. I was cast out from this place with nothing. Now, I returned as the one who would decide its fate. This was not revenge. This was redemption. Redemption for a legacy and for my own life. 1 year later, the building on the once bustling street now bore a new sign of dark ebony wood, inscribed with 3 golden calligraphic characters. Tan Vorng Vien, the New Hope Garden. The ostentatious glamour of Bách Niên Vọng was gone, replaced by a quiet, refined beauty. It had taken us a year to renovate everything, not just to repair, but to resurrect. The grand banquet hall had been replaced by several smaller, more intimate dining spaces. The upper floor became a library and exhibition space dedicated to the art of Chinese cuisine. And most importantly, the kitchen was completely redesigned, with a special corner reserved for my classes. Li Zhenfeng's heritage class accepted only 6 students per course, and the waiting list already extended into the next year. The cellar for the blood dragon mushrooms was restored, better than ever. I moved half of my stock from the serene garden here. The 2 restaurants, one old and one new, were now like 2 brothers, sharing a common soul. The serene garden remained a hidden gem, a place for private experiences. The New Hope Garden, however, was a beacon, a declaration of a legacy's revival. On the opening night of New Hope, I was no longer the head chef. That responsibility fell to Xiao Zhang, now a talented and confident young chef in his own right. I simply stood back, observing with a smile. Around him were the young cooks, my first students. They worked with a smooth, passionate rhythm, with absolute respect for every ingredient. My legacy was no longer in the hands of a single individual. It had begun to spread. Among the guests that night were many familiar faces. Food critics, old patrons of Bách Niên Vọng who had returned out of curiosity, and even my former colleagues who had lost their jobs after the collapse. I had invited all of them back to work, and not one had refused. When the dragon soul soup was served, the entire room once again fell silent, just like on the opening night of the serene garden. But this time, the silence held not just appreciation, but also nostalgia and deep emotion. An elderly customer shed tears. I thought I would never taste this flavor again, he said. At the end of the evening, Ani and I stood together on the balcony, looking down at the bustling nightlife of Shanghai. The city's neon lights glittered like a river of stars. Are you happy, Chef Li? Ani asked. I didn't answer right away. I thought about the journey I had taken. From the pinnacle of fame to the depths of humiliation, from the solitude of my small house to the joy in the serene garden, and finally, to this proud return. I had lost much, but I had gained even more. I had learned that true value lies not in money or fame, but in dedication to one's craft, in passing on a legacy, and in knowing how to forgive. I wasn't looking for happiness, Ani, I said at last. I was looking for peace, and tonight, I have found it. I no longer held any hatred for Wang Hao. I'd heard that after his release from prison, he left Shanghai to live a quiet, anonymous life. He had paid the price for his mistakes. His story was a cautionary tale, but my story, I hoped, would be an inspiration. The soup I made was not a soup of forgotten roots. It was a soup of origins, of memory, and now, of hope. Standing there, breathing in the fresh air of a new beginning, I knew that dawn would always come, not just over the Shanghai Bund, but within my own soul. My life, like a good soup, needed to be simmered through time, through fire and tears, to finally achieve a sweet, tranquil aftertaste. Life at the New Hope Garden settled into a peaceful yet vibrant rhythm. In the mornings, I was no longer the first one in the kitchen. Instead, I would spend my time strolling through the garden, listening to the birds, and feeling the subtle shifts of the seasons. By the time I walked in, Xiaozhang would already be there, directing his young team as they prepped for the day. The kitchen was no longer just mine. It had a new heartbeat, a new vitality. Xiaozhang did not disappoint me. He not only mastered every technique I passed down, but also possessed an innate sensitivity to ingredients. Under his leadership, New Hope not only maintained its reputation but garnered fresh acclaim. Critics said the food here had the depth of heritage combined with the freshness of youth. But I began to notice an invisible shadow weighing on my students' shoulders. Despite having full creative control, Xiaozhang's dishes, though excellent, always bore my imprint. He seemed afraid to step off the path I had laid for him. He cooked perfectly, but it was the perfection of a master copyist, not the transcendence of an independent artist. The pressure intensified when unexpected news arrived. The New Hope Garden was nominated for the Global Golden Pinnacle Award, one of the most prestigious culinary honors in the world, often called the Oscars of the kitchen. This was an honor that even Bách Niên Vọng in its golden age had never achieved. The entire staff erupted in joy, but I saw the anxiety deepen in Xiaozhang's eyes. "Master, what should we do?" He sought me out, his voice fraught with tension. The judges could arrive unannounced any time within the next month. We must prepare the dragon soul soup in its most perfect state. Every detail must be precise. "You are the head chef, Xiaozhang," I said gently. "You decide what needs to be done." But this is your legacy, your reputation," he said, his voice almost pleading. "I can't ruin it. I think, during this time, perhaps you should return to lead the kitchen, just for a little while, until after the judging is over." I looked deeply into my student's eyes. I saw his devotion and respect, but above all I saw fear. He was afraid of failure, but even more, he was afraid of disappointing me. My shadow had grown too large, obscuring his own confidence. "Xiaozhang," I placed a hand on his shoulder. "I entrusted this kitchen to you because I trust you. If I return to cook, then the award, if we win it, will belong to an old man on the verge of retirement. But if you achieve it, it will be a recognition for your generation, for the future of New Hope. Do you understand?" He nodded, but I knew my words were not enough to dispel the clouds in his heart. In the following days, the atmosphere in the kitchen became tense. Xiaozhang's perfectionism became extreme. He checked the temperature of the soup pot every 5 minutes. He made the assistant chefs slice vegetables to the exact micrometer. The joy of creation vanished, replaced by the heavy pressure of recreating a masterpiece. He was no longer cooking with his heart, but with his fear. I did not intervene, only observed quietly. I knew this was a challenge he had to overcome on his own. A legacy should not be a golden cage that imprisons the successor. It should be a pair of wings to help them fly higher. But to fly, Xiaozhang first had to find his own sky. And I feared that sky was about to be covered by an approaching storm. The storm did not come from the outside, but from the very heart of our sanctuary, the blood dragon mushroom cellar. One morning, as usual, I went down to check on my children. Everything seemed normal. The temperature, humidity, and light were all perfect. But as I approached a tray of mushrooms in a far corner, I sensed something was wrong. The familiar earthy aroma seemed fainter, replaced by a slightly musty, barely perceptible smell. I leaned in closer. The blood dragon mushrooms on this tray, while still a vibrant red, had tiny, ash-white specks at their base, and their texture seemed slightly softer than usual. My heart seized. In over 40 years of cultivation, I had never encountered this phenomenon. I carefully picked one mushroom and held it to my nose. Yes, the signature aroma was significantly weaker. I knew that if these mushrooms were used for the soup, The flavor would never reach its customary depth and subtlety. It would be a delicious soup, but a soulless one. I immediately isolated the entire tray and began a silent investigation. I rechecked the entire air filtration system, the water source, the composition of the substrate. Everything was up to standard. I told no one, not even Ani or Xiaozhang. I didn't want to cause a panic, especially at such a sensitive time. But the problem didn't stop. A few days later, 2 more trays began to show similar symptoms. The strange ailment was spreading quietly. I felt a fear I hadn't experienced in a long time. The blood dragon mushrooms weren't just an ingredient, they were a life form, and their life was under threat. The worry kept me up at night. During the day, I maintained a calm facade, still teaching my classes and offering advice to Xiaozhang. But at night, after everyone had gone home, I would descend into the cellar alone, sitting for hours beside the trays, trying to find the cause. I felt as helpless as a doctor facing a new disease not found in any textbook. My changed behavior did not escape Xiaozhang's notice. He saw me going down to the cellar alone more often, saw the fatigue in my eyes. "Master, is something wrong?" He stopped me one day. "In the cellar?" I knew I couldn't hide it anymore. I led him down and showed him the ailing mushrooms. Xiaozhang's face went pale. The pressure from the Golden Pinnacle Award was already immense. Now this disaster. It was like a dagger to his hopes. "Why? Why is this happening?" he stammered. "Did we do something wrong?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I have checked everything. Perhaps there is some external environmental factor that we cannot control." This dealt a heavy blow to Xiaozhang. He became irritable, snapping at the junior cooks. The perfection he was trying to build was crumbling before his eyes. The doubled pressure brought him to the verge of a breakdown. The relationship between us also began to show cracks. He felt I was hiding things, trying to solve the problem on my own, as if I didn't trust his abilities. "Is it my fault?" he asked me one evening, his voice full of bitterness. "Is it because I'm not good enough? Because I don't have the right chi to care for them, that they're falling ill?" "Don't be foolish," I snapped. "This is a scientific problem, not a spiritual one." But deep down, I too had a vague fear. The blood dragon was an incredibly sensitive organism. Could the stress and fear in the kitchen be affecting them? Could the successor's insecurity be harming the legacy itself? The jade bowl of new hope now had a crack, and I was afraid that if we didn't find a way to mend it soon, it would shatter completely. There wasn't much time left. The judges from the Golden Pinnacle could arrive at any moment. While we were tangled in our anxieties, the uninvited guest appeared. It was late one afternoon, as Xiaozhang and I were in my office, locked in a heated argument about whether we should temporarily reduce the amount of blood dragon mushroom in the soup to preserve our stock. Xiaozhang felt it would be deceitful. I saw it as a necessary stopgap. Ani entered, her expression troubled. "Someone is here to see you, Chef Li," she said. "He's been waiting outside for over an hour. He says he won't leave until he speaks with you." "Who is it?" I asked, slightly annoyed. "It's Wang Hao." The name fell like a bucket of ice water on our fiery debate. Wang Hao. He had been released from prison a few months ago, but no one had heard anything about him. What was he doing here? Had he come to gloat at our misfortune? "Send him away," Xiaozhang said immediately, his voice filled with contempt. "He is not welcome here." I felt the same, but something in Annie's eyes made me hesitate. "What does he look like?" I asked. "Very different," Annie replied. "The arrogance is gone. He looks haggard and almost frightened. He kept repeating that he might know what's happening to your mushrooms." That last sentence made me change my mind. What did he know? Could it be? I decided to meet him, alone, in the garden. Wang Hao stood under a magnolia tree, his back to me. He had lost a lot of weight, and his plain clothes seemed to hang off his frame. The once perfectly slicked hair now had streaks of gray. Hearing my footsteps, he turned around. I had braced myself for a confrontation, but when I looked into his eyes, my defenses crumbled. They were the eyes of a man who had lost everything, empty and filled with despair. Master Li," he stammered, his head bowed. I'm sorry to disturb you." "What are you doing here?" I asked directly. He hesitated for a long moment, then pulled a crumpled sheaf of papers from his pocket. "I heard that your mushrooms are having problems," he said, his voice trembling. Back at Bách Niên Vọng, I hired a team of mycologists to analyze them for the Dragon Soul 2.0 project. They discovered something, but I didn't care about it at the time. He handed me the papers. It was an old scientific report, filled with complex terminology. I scanned it, then stopped at a paragraph circled in red ink. Cordyceps sanguis, I read aloud, is a species extremely sensitive to airborne sulfur compounds. Elevated concentrations of sulfur dioxide, SO2, even at trace levels, can inhibit mycelial growth, causing a phenomenon of albification and vitality decline. Sulfur dioxide, emissions from factories, from burning fossil fuels. Recently, Wang Hao continued, looking up, a new chemical plant was built on the city's outskirts, about 15 kilometers upwind from here. They began trial operations about 2 months ago. I happened to read about it in a small business paper. I thought, could it be? My mind felt like it had been struck by lightning. 2 months ago. That was exactly when the first symptoms appeared. The plant's location, the wind direction. It all fit together with terrifying precision. Our air filtration system was modern, but it was designed to filter dust and microbes, not trace pollutant gases. I looked at Wang Hao, unsure of what to say. He had brought me the answer I had been searching for in vain. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Wang Hao bowed his head, his voice almost a whisper. "In prison, I had a lot of time to think. I thought about my grandfather, about Bách Niên Vọng, about what I did. I destroyed everything. I can't fix it, but I don't want my grandfather's last legacy to be ruined by someone else's mistake. Consider this. Consider this the only thing I can do to atone for a very small part of my wrongdoing." After he spoke, he didn't dare look at me. He just gave a slight bow, turned, and walked away. His figure was lonely and dejected as it disappeared into the Shanghai dusk. I stood there, holding the report, my mind a whirl of emotions. The man who had once tried to kill the soul of Bách Niên Vọng was now the one who had brought the key to its salvation. Life truly moved in circles no one could predict. I knew what I had to do, but the solution would not be easy, and time was waiting for no one. The news about the air pollution hit all of us hard. Ani immediately contacted environmental experts. They confirmed that Wang Hao's theory was entirely plausible. The only solution was to install a specialized industrial-grade gas filtration system, but that would take at least 2 months. 2 months, when the Golden Pinnacle judges could arrive tomorrow. Hope seemed to be extinguished. Xiao Zhang was completely demoralized. "It's over," he said, slumping to the kitchen floor. All our effort was for nothing. A gloomy cloud settled over the New Hope garden. People still worked, but like automatons. The passion was gone. I knew that if I didn't do something, their spirits would break long before the blood dragon mushrooms died out completely. That evening I called Xiao Zhang and Ani into my office. I placed 2 mushrooms on the table, a perfect one from an older batch I had preserved, and one that was lightly afflicted, with white spots at its base. "We cannot change the direction of the wind," I said, my voice calm. "But we can change the way we cook." I looked directly at Xiao Zhang. "You have always tried to recreate my perfect dragon soul soup. But have you ever thought of creating a dragon soul soup of your own?" Xiao Zhang stared at me, bewildered. "This mushroom," I pointed to the ailing one, "is not perfect. It is weaker, its aroma has changed, but it is not useless. It is simply telling a different story, a story of struggle, of adaptation. Why don't we listen to that story? Why don't we use this very imperfection to create a new flavor?" My idea was radical. It went against everything I had ever taught, against the philosophy of the dragon soul soup's purity. Ani looked at me with concern, while Xiao Zhang was completely stunned. "But, the judges, they are coming to taste the legendary soup," he stammered. "Then let's give them a new legend," I said firmly. "A legend of creativity in the face of adversity. You are a talented chef, Xiao Zhang. Don't let my shadow obscure you any longer. Trust your instincts. Have a dialogue with the ingredients you have, even if they are flawed. I believe you can do it." That night, Xiao Zhang stayed behind in the kitchen, alone. I don't know what he did, or what he thought. But the next morning, when I walked in, I saw a completely different person. The fatigue and fear were gone. In their place was an intense focus, a bright flame in his eyes. "Master, I have an idea," he said, his voice brimming with confidence. And then, the fateful day arrived. The 3 judges from the Golden Pinnacle Award, the most powerful figures in the culinary world, arrived without notice. They sat down and requested the most special tasting menu. The entire kitchen held its breath. Xiao Zhang was unnervingly calm. He did not cook the traditional dragon soul soup. Instead, he created an entirely new dish. He took the imperfect mushrooms, extracting their altered flavor profile, and combined it with a delicate, sweet seafood and a wild green with a clean, bitter note. The soup was served in an ash-colored ceramic bowl, symbolizing their current plight. He named it Dragon Soul Reborn. When the dish was served, I stood in a corner of the kitchen, my heart pounding. This was a huge gamble. They could see it as blasphemy, as a failure. The judges looked at the soup, slightly surprised. They tasted it. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then one of them, a notoriously stern French critic, set down his spoon. He looked at Xiao Zhang, who was waiting anxiously outside. "Chef," he said in English, "this is not the dragon soul soup I have read about in the legends." My heart stopped. "It is more," he continued, a rare smile gracing his lips. "This dish has a story. It has sorrow. It has struggle. But above all, it has hope. It is not just delicious. It makes one think. Congratulations. You are not just cooking. You are composing poetry." The kitchen erupted in silent celebration. Xiao Zhang bowed, his shoulders shaking. He had done it. He hadn't just saved the situation, he had found his own voice, a voice even more powerful than perfection. He had created a symphony from the discordant notes themselves. We did not win the Golden Pinnacle Award that year. The prize went to a restaurant in Copenhagen with cutting-edge molecular gastronomy techniques, but no one at the New Hope Garden felt disappointed. We had received something far more valuable than a title. We had rediscovered our soul in the midst of a storm. The letter the judges sent privately to Xiao Zhang contained a line that said, "You have reminded us that the greatest culinary art sometimes comes not from perfection, but from honesty." The Dragon Soul Reborn became a new legend. It didn't replace the traditional soup but existed alongside it, a symbol of our resilience and creativity. The new air filtration system was finally installed, and the blood dragon mushrooms slowly returned to health. But the lesson of imperfection remained with us forever. Xiao Zhang had truly come into his own. He was no longer afraid of my shadow. He respected the legacy, but was not imprisoned by it. The menu at New Hope began to feature dishes that were distinctly his, bold, elegant, and always telling a story. He had become a storyteller through taste. As for me, I had found my final role in life. I was no longer a head chef, nor just a teacher of techniques. I became a mentor of philosophy. In my heritage class, I didn't start by teaching students how to hold a knife or simmer a broth. I started by taking them into the garden, teaching them how to feel the soil, how to listen to the plants. The most important recipe is not written on paper, I told them in their first lesson. It is here, I pointed to my heart, and here, I pointed to my head. It is the connection between the mind and the heart. It is the respect for your ingredients. It is the patience to let time work its magic. You can learn techniques anywhere, but that unwritten recipe, you must feel for yourselves. I did not teach them how to become a second Li Zhenfeng. I taught them how to become themselves, to find the soul in their own cuisine. Ani developed the New Hope Garden into a culinary cultural space. She organized talks and exhibitions, connecting farmers, artisans, and young chefs. The place became a flame, spreading the philosophy of sustainable and authentic cuisine. One afternoon, as I was sitting in the library reading an old book on herbs, Ani brought me a letter. It had no return address. The handwriting was messy, yet familiar. "Master Li," it read. "I read the news about Dragon Soul Reborn. I think I may finally understand the true meaning of the word legacy. It is not something to be copied, but something to be continued and made more alive. Thank you for not giving up on it. I wish you and the New Hope Garden all the best. W.H." I folded the letter, a gentle smile on my lips. Wang Hao might never be able to fully atone for his mistakes, but at least he had begun to understand. The vicious circle of hatred and regret could finally close, completely. I looked out the window. My class had just ended. The young students were gathered in the garden, laughing and talking, holding fresh ingredients they had just harvested. Xiao Zhang was with them, pointing something out on a leaf. The flame had been passed on. It was burning brightly and warmly. A legacy, in the end, is not a soup, not a restaurant, not a name. A legacy is a flame, passed from one generation to the next, so that each generation can light it in their own way, illuminating the path ahead. And I, a tired old chef, was content to have been its keeper.